growth requires more than capital.
Why do we call it the cheat code? Nobody said growth had to be fair.
Revenue solves everything.
Welcome to the cheat code. What was our fastest path to revenue?
We tend to like to do things the hard way.
What's the cheat code? It's giving yourself an unfair advantage over the others.
What is it that really works, and how are we going to grow these organizations?
That's our cheat code. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Go-to-Market Cheat Code. I am Josh Wagner alongside Justin Gray. Justin, how's it hanging?
It's a great day to be alive.
Great day to be alive. Fresh off a trip to Atlanta. So we go from hot and dry to hot and humid.
Ugh.
Yeah, a little suffocating, but we're back into the blow dryer that is Arizona, which is fantastic. So super excited. We have another episode here. This is season 3 of the Cheat Code. We're focusing on marketing and marketing cheats for different folks that we're talking to. And today's guest is no different. We're super excited to have him here. He's currently the director of partnerships at Loop, has held several partnerships roles throughout his career that have exited successfully, which is exciting. So we can hear about some marketing cheats in that vein. So let's please welcome Marco DePaulis to the show. Marco, welcome.
Thank you so much, guys. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
It's exciting to have you here. And I know that, the partner professionals, I love getting partner professionals' take on marketing cheats because I think it's an underutilized area. So let's just dive right into it. What is your ultimate marketing cheat code?
Yeah, I mean, shouldn't come as a surprise with my background, but my cheat is not to go to market alone. You know, there's so much opportunity to go to market with symbiotic players in your space that work with the brands and customers that you want to be in front of that already have their trust. So why not go out to them and talk to them as, a trusted partner of somebody that they're already working with or speaking with or have some sort of a relationship with, and you just are that much more efficient and effective and trustworthy.
Yeah, absolutely love that. So do you think of that as like, down and dirty audience hacking, or are you thinking about this a little bit more sophisticated than that?
I can't say I'm all that sophisticated about it, to be honest. I think it's a little bit of, yes, like there's the audience hack in a sense of, hey, we can, basically get in front of this audience of thousands or tens of thousands of followers or customers or what have you through this other company that we have a great relationship with and we have a really strong, joint message together. But I also think it just changes the messaging and the value proposition and like the angle and can be more unique and differentiated. I think one of the challenges in marketing, and I come from, tech and SaaS in general, like everyone's saying the same stuff, like everyone's the best and the market leader and the number one. And so like, it's really
Magic quadrant up and to the right.
Right. So like, how do you stand out in that? I think that one of the easiest ways to do it is to, have somebody else also saying like, yeah, these guys are great. And you should be interested in what they have to bring and the value of their software or their services or their tools. It just gives you that much more of like an authentic voice rather than just, being on your own and saying how great you are. Right.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting aspects when it comes down to co-marketing, is choosing those right partners. And a facet of that, certainly what you just, hinted around, which is, what is that better together story? How do our products, product and service or whatever that mix and mingle is, how do those come together to better serve that customer? But I find there's also, a really important aspect of, can they actually mobilize and participate? And we run into this over and over again to where, maybe even the best partner from a solution standpoint just can't get out of bed in the morning and actually put pen to paper. And so yeah. I'm curious as to what you found there in terms of, articulating that value, but then also ensuring that you're assembling that with a group that actually is aligned and can go make something happen together.
Yeah, no, all good points, because definitely not everyone is great at go-to-market or is great at it's a different motion, right? Like doing it alongside somebody else versus it just doing it as a standalone. Frankly, like there's a lot of trial and error that just goes into it, right? Like you just don't know what you don't know until you try it out, you test it out. But I think you can also do, there's quite a bit of research you can do, right? Like go figure out that this company's execution and their general marketing tactics and their brand and their ability to generate demand and their ability to, get to whatever point they are in their business. But also I think from like a cultural perspective, like you just have to feel that stuff out. How do they operate? Yep. How do they work? Are they quick? Are they nimble? Or are they super corporate enterprise, takes 3 months to get a blog post approved sort of thing? And, you just have to feel it out over time. I think the last comment I'll make is that you also want to have some opinions and some, very specific like guidelines for how you intend to execute a project and what expectations you have of that partner and what goals you're trying to set, so that everyone's aligned and on the same page and can either commit or, frankly have to say like, hey, that doesn't work for us because of reasons A, B, or C, and figure out how to go from there.
Yeah, that's a really great point in terms of, some of the stuff is more obvious than we would probably expect or give credit to. Like, Josh, I know we ran into this a ton with Drift, who, speaking frankly, wasn't the best partner for us from a product perspective and from services perspective. It's pretty lightweight. They didn't need a heavyweight consulting motion tacked on to the solution, but like they could just execute. And so we had, we knew that the audience had a large amount of overlap, and they could just do things that were creative and pragmatic. And so that made them a great go-to-market partner for us, even though, the product partnership wasn't as strong as some others out there. So just a great point, but sometimes the things are just kind of staring us in the face.
Yeah. And not all partners check all the boxes, I think, to your point, right, Justin?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've all kind of experienced that clunkiness when it's, whether it's a lack of execution or lack of joint value prop or whatever it may be. But can you share an example of something you've seen go really well, whether it's one of your prior roles, someone in the ecosystem? Doesn't matter. I'd love to hear a great example in your mind.
One that's gone really, really well. I mean, I think there's a couple ways you can define really well in co-marketing. So it depends like what's the goal and the outset. So let me like lay that out in the way that I think about it. I think about it in two ways. One, there's like branding and how can you elevate your brand and just be seen as just a legit player in the space, because, usually like one or the other is a little bigger or a little bit more well-known, right?
Absolutely.
And so there's that aspect of it. And then there's okay, what are we actually doing for the funnel and for demand generation and, getting the MQLs and the leads and the CRM and then actually actioning off of that. So for the former, the last company I was at, they went through a big rebrand when I was just joining. And part of that rebrand, or a reason for that rebrand, was that they were sort of like reincarnating the business and pivoting and focusing in a new vertical, which was e-commerce. And so I was coming from an e-commerce company. And for me, I was like, okay, well, the path to the quickest results here is not for us to try and create this own brand and get everyone to figure out like now we do e-commerce and that we're a legit player, but it was like, all right, we need to go to market with some other players in this space. And that was my first initiative coming on board, was all right, let's like figure out the right partners here. Let's make sure we create a program where, we can have a good bi-directional relationship, and let's go to market together. And we established a bunch of partnerships in a really short amount of time. We really leaned into the co-marketing side. And I'd say, within just a couple quarters, like we had a bit of a reputation already. We had like some recognition in just a short amount of time versus if you were just trying to do it yourself, right? And do it from your own marketing, your own copy, your own content, and building that following and that in those engagements. So, that was a pretty successful and a really good experience to go through, I think, on that branding and just like building the awareness side of it. From demand generation, I'd say like the company I'm at right now, Loop, they do a really solid job and in a lot of, going to market with partners and actually seeing results from it. And there's a lot of different things. I mean, I think that there's like the more broad public stuff, whether it's, big webinars and events, or frankly, like we strike up these really interesting partnerships where we are commercially agreeing to, what are we going to be able to drive each other and what is that going to, look like materially, that we've executed a few different times. One since I've been here, a couple before that have been like monumental changes for the business. And there's also some things that are just like small and niche and behind the scenes and more like in real life. And those are very event focused. And we seem to do a pretty good job. As long as we have the right partners, we've done the song and dance a bunch of times, so we know what kind of partners work well, which don't, which ones can drive attendance, which ones have a harder time, what geographies make the most sense for us, and what don't. And so I think we've done a lot of testing there, and we've definitely fallen on our face a little bit. But now we know we have the motion down where we can get some good pipeline out of just running like some dinners or some niche experiential events in person too.
So I'm curious because it seems like you've been a part of, at least a couple different organizations where partnerships have been, high and central to the success of the organization, and obviously the partnership kind of ecosystem and program within those organizations saw the benefit of that. Talking about like growing a program 10x and so on. Do you find that the typical headspace of like the CEO, the leadership team has to be fundamentally bought in? Is that a truth that you've seen, across these experiences so far, or also, counter to that, have you had to go out and kind of fight for that executive alignment?
Yeah, so it helps a lot if it's there, but it's not always there. I've been in both types of businesses, so. But even if a CEO believes in it, that doesn't always mean it's all going to work out either, because there's a difference between somebody at the top saying like, yeah, this is a good thing and we're going to invest in it. But like they ultimately have to give the directive and like convince everybody else in the organization that they should be supporting the partnership initiatives, because you can't be successful if you're just, a team on an island. Like the most successful functions in an organization are when they're cross-functional, right? At least in my experience, in my opinion. So I definitely have had CEOs that are into it, but like they're not going and convincing other leaders or maybe supporting my ask, my requests, and like my initiatives to get alignment with others. And then I definitely have had CEOs where like they didn't know what the hell it was, or like, a lot of them, some of those old school ones, like they don't even necessarily believe in marketing, right? And so like, how do you convince and teach somebody who's not necessarily opposed, but they just haven't seen it ever done successfully? And so those are interesting experience where like, I find that like a fun challenge. It could go horribly wrong, or it could work out really well. I've been fortunate for it to work out better than the opposite.
So maybe dive into a bit of that experience, because that's what I consistently get from, folks that are either trying to revamp a partnership program or they're trying to get some traction. Like they're looking for, how do I get that organizational alignment, especially as it pertains to marketing? Because as you mentioned earlier, like you've got to mobilize those teams and make sure that they're all aiming for the same thing. They know what it looks like. They've got that context. Hard to do when you don't have, alignment even within your own organization. So what have you seen that's been successful there?
Yeah, this is something I really enjoy trying to figure out and talking about and like helping other people figure it out. Because again, to my earlier point, if you don't have alignment and buy-in from other teams, you're just like, it's like fighting with one hand behind your back, And so whether it's, from the marketing perspective, like you need the support from, design and RevOps and sales and SDRs, like everyone has to be bought into what you're doing. Otherwise you're just, you're going to fall flat. So to answer your question, I think the biggest thing people overlook in terms of building internal alignment is actually aligning on like key goals and KPIs. So everyone's like, oh, well, I need people to do these things so that I can be successful and that I can do what I need to do. But these people have a ton of other stuff on their plates. They have their own goals, their own numbers, their own priorities. And so when they're just getting requests to do more things, like that's just going to be at the bottom of their list unless you take a step back and you really like get to know what these departments are working on, what they're goaled on, what their bigger initiatives are. And you have to figure out how you fit into that. You can't just be asking for things to serve yourself and your own needs, your own goals. You have to make sure, hey, I'm requesting this thing so that we can accomplish this, which is then going to help you hit A, B, and C type of goal, or like accomplish X, Y, Z type of project and initiative. And I think it's just very overlooked for whatever reason. And so like, you just have to have a very candid alignment type of conversation. It sounds kind of corny, but like, what are you goaled on? How do your reps get comped? How does your, like comp structure really work? And what are your objectives as a team this quarter or this year? And you have to also be transparent about how it works for your team so that you can then find those ways to then align around a common project, a common initiative, or a common goal. And it doesn't matter what department you're in, like those are important conversations to have, in my opinion, because at the end of the day, you're always going to have to lean on someone and rely on someone in a different part of the business than you're in.
Yeah, that context is critical.
Yeah, and it's a great call out because, I think, Justin would agree. When we were at LeadMD, we saw for a good decade marketing trying to, find a seat at the revenue table was the term you heard often. And the challenge that they had was not being able to translate the work that they were doing to departmental KPIs and then rolling that up to executive KPIs and then rolling that into boardroom type of speak, right? They just never were able to create that translation layer. And frankly, I'm seeing partner teams go through a similar cycle right now, right? Where they're not able to translate their work to the boardroom. And that's what we're going to be talking about when we go to the Arcadia Leadership Experience coming up here in Bozeman, Montana. But curious, what are some of the tricks you've seen to make that translation, right? Whether it's in marketing or partnerships or otherwise, because I think it's a really big point that teams are faced with.
Yes, challenge.
Yeah, I mean, my approach just generally for doesn't matter the department you're in, like to get that to build your case, to build your business case, and to then like get more support and alignment and funding, whatever it is I'm just like a nerd about tracking as much data as I possibly can to support the narrative that I have. Like, so I think of everything as like, what's the qualitative side? What's the quantitative side? You can tell a great story and, make these really grandiose promises or big ideas and get people excited. But if you don't have anything to back it up or any proof, then it kind of falls flat. And I think whether it's marketing or partnerships, and why people may not believe in them, as much as they should or could, is because a lot of people talk things up and they don't really follow through with the actual results and the data to back that up. So, from the partnership side, which I play in the most, I'm always trying to make sure that there's data around the leading indicators and the lagging indicators. And I think it's the same for marketing. So like, what are the activities that are happening? What's the motions going on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis? And how do you track that stuff? How many partners are we working with? How many sort of meetings and leads are coming from those, and focusing on that piece. And then what's the output and the goals that you have around, revenue and opportunities and what have you. And then there's also like small in-between things that you can just try and track, right? So how does this partner impact non-partner sourced opportunities? And how does this partner impact existing accounts and retention and churn? And I think you do the same for marketing. So like, what are all the activities? What are all the reps that are happening? And how are you guys measuring that? Because there's so much that happens in between closed revenue, right? So you need to show all of that activity, because otherwise people are like, what are those guys doing? Like we see them talking a lot. They're asking for a lot of things, but like, are they really doing the things that they need to be doing? Especially when there is a timeline to results. Like, some marketing is a little bit faster. Partnerships can be a little bit longer. It can be a couple quarters until you're really seeing things like fully turning. So yeah, it may seem, I don't know, it may sound like a super basic thing, but like track all of it and report on all of it so that you can show those reps and that activity and those inputs, and you're building your case for when the outputs are then coming. And then you have a nice, really complete story for like, this is what we did. This is how we got out of it, or what we got out of it. And then how do you continue to optimize? And then, hey, to optimize, we need more stuff. We need more resources. We need more people, things like that.
Yeah, I think it's, you mentioned basic, like the crazy thing is like so many organizations still, even with this whole rise of RevOps and the amount of money that everyone's put into this function, like still cannot report on just end-to-end pipeline with really basic KPIs like velocity and aging and bucket by bucket and so on. And if you don't have that baseline, you're never going to be able to report on the improvement against that baseline with something like, a co-market effort with a partner, or, even just a different experimental campaign. So I think there's a big correlation and parity that we see in terms of organizations that fail to get executive buy-in for things like marketing or partnerships and co-marketing, and the prevalence of lack of basic reporting just end to end. Like those two seem to kind of go hand in hand. Like if you don't have a really good view of how the business operates, and to be looking for that quick fix, that flash in the pan, like what did it do for me the next day, rather than having the confidence to know that, you know, this is going to perform over time, and this is how we expect to see those dials turn.
It's a really good point there, the flash in the pan. Like there's an art to, you know, not making those sacrifices for like a short-term benefit, right? And so like this all comes back full circle. You need the trust to have some runway to do the big things that are going to get you like those big wins. But if you're not creating an environment in which like you are inviting trust, which is like a lack of data, a lack of transparency and visibility, then you're never going to get the runway to do like those bigger critical things that are like what truly build long-term success. And so it's all very much related, but I just had to call that out. The flash in the pan comment was good.
Yeah. I wonder, you know, earlier you made the distinction of, okay, we're going to form this partnership. We're going to do joint marketing and this branding thread. And then you had a demand generation thread. What's the expectation of that CEO, whether they are into it or not into it, of that branding campaign with another partner?
The expectation,
probably what expectation, like branding is always the interesting topic.
Yeah, either way.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point, Justin. Like you need to differentiate and delineate like what you're doing and for which reason. And I think at the end of the day, all of these things need to then, going back to alignment, like they need to correlate back to some bigger business goal and bigger initiative, right? And so if you're a super, massive company and like you have the recognition, then maybe if you don't have to do as much branding, or like the CEO won't invest in that or support that because like the money doesn't need to be spent there. But I think it's just setting the right expectations and aligning on, hey, we're going to be investing this and for this initiative, for this purpose. And like, we're not planning on seeing pipeline from it, but this is important to do because of the company goal that, we set out to do last quarter at the beginning of the year to get to, the end of this year as like a respected player and maybe there's some data that supports that. Right. So I think that's the really, really critical part. And I think a lot of people don't maybe necessarily do that well enough. They're not setting that expectation correctly. They're not associating it back to a bigger goal or some bigger conversation around strategy that the company was either needs to put in place or has already put in place.
Yeah, I always find it fascinating because one of those unknown benefits of branding that I don't think a lot of folks think about is the impact on sales. So I had a lot of friends who were really good sellers when they were at Marketo, right? And Marketo invested heavily in marketing, heavily in demand generation, heavily in brand and whatnot. And they benefited from that, right? You make an outbound phone call, someone knows who Marketo is, that bridging that gap already gives you a bit of an edge, right?
Yeah.
Then they go to other businesses that don't believe in marketing and don't believe in this and that, and they really struggle, right? Even if they were doing outbound before, that outbound gets harder because now you have to like bridge that gap of who the hell are you? What is this brand? Do I trust it? Do I know it? That whole thing. So there's that element of it as well. And I know now, taking it from the partnership angle, partner marketing, we benefited from that at LeadMD, right? Like we attached ourselves to a marketing company that marketed themselves really well. So our outbound efforts, whether they're marketing efforts, sales efforts, whatever it was, attaching it to that Marketo is like, oh, this is a known entity. Oh yeah, I do need help with that. Okay, right. It just closes that gap. So I think being able to have conversations with sales and help them understand if this is making their life better or not is a simple metric, because CEOs tend to get sales, right? It's like, it's a cash register. They do these things, it happens.
It's a great point. And it goes back to like measurement. Like, are you thinking pragmatically about that? Because like everyone's got all this plethora of tools out there right now, whether you've got like Gong, Chorus, like so everyone's doing call recording. Like so easy to like put a tracker in for sentiment. Like, oh yeah, I've heard of you guys, or oh, I think I've seen that before. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and just start to attach something. And I think that's where like the creativity of partnerships like needs to be, one of those areas of focus that every team is valuing, simply because like you have to think about like, I'm going to have to show value in this, even if this is a branding initiative. Like, hey, what's the traffic to the website looking like post event? What's that sentiment looking like on calls? Like, are we getting, feedback from our sellers? So there's certainly ways to steer that executive buy-in, I think, that a lot of teams just don't always take advantage of.
Yeah, I have an interesting anecdote from a previous job there. So Dave Gerhardt was a CMO of a company I worked at, Privy, right after he left Drift. And I had an amazing privilege to work with him for a good year. And he was big on podcasts, if you guys know or remember.
Yeah.
And like, how do you associate podcasts to pipeline or revenue? Like, it's near impossible. But he was very, very big on brands and like how that tangentially plays into all the different facets of revenue and demand. And one of the things he was sort of leaned on was like, okay, you're going to make a bet. You have to invest some time in it, right? Talking about like flash in the pan or long-term initiatives.
Yeah.
And no, we're not going to be able to tell directly if there's pipeline or revenue coming from this. But what we can do is start to get like some qualitative signs from that. And so basically we had to start changing some things in the sales process and ask a little bit more like, how'd you hear about us and whatever. And like, we would say the podcast come up and surely more and more time happened that passed. And like podcasts was a bigger and bigger and bigger reason in that field of where did you hear about us, right? So like sometimes you can't necessarily correlate it, but like you can get some data and some bits just to say like, okay, like this is going in the right direction. This is doing what we intend. Can we tell how much revenue generated? Absolutely not. But, there's enough here to like justify continuing to do it or not.
Yeah, those little hooks. I mean, like it's crazy to me. Like normally if you walk into like a mom and pop business, like they're going to be very apt to ask you like, hey, how'd you hear about us? Where'd you find us? So on and so forth. Like he has gotten away from that just because of, again, this influx of technology to where we think we already know the answer to that question. But the recognition aspect is just such a huge and an overlooked dimension there. And I think, when sitting in as many board meetings as we do these days, like it's so strange to me to see that like board members and executives alike have such a weight on recognition. Like, oh yeah, I've heard of those guys before, right? And suddenly you just greenlit an initiative that's like a 5 or 6 figure purchase fully on like, oh yeah, I think we can check that out. And so there's some of these elements, getting back to basics and to your point earlier, like measuring everything are the keys to assembling, one hell of a recipe there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love not dismissing the qualitative. I mean, use a very simple, small example. We're a 1.5-year-old venture capital firm, basically 3 guys in a closet with a podcast and write a bunch of content. And the qualitative is we talk to people like, man, you guys are everywhere. Oh yeah, I heard of you guys. How'd you get so big so fast? Like I said, we're 3 guys in a closet, pretending to be venture capitalists. So
video games in that closet though.
Yeah, we got a video game right here. I got a couple headsets in the back. I mean, it is one of those qualitative things that if you do not, you just ask the question, how'd you hear about it? How do you know about us? Oh, where'd you get the referral from? My friend listened to your podcast and they said, you should meet these guys. Oh, cool.
Which is one of those things, as you scale, like that has to be built in from a DNA perspective. It's easy to do when the founder is doing founder-led sales and on the line with the prospect. Harder to do when you've got, dozens of folks on a sales team. So like those I think are again, areas where good, marketers, partnership leaders, like they know what they're looking for in order to try and prove value in their efforts and to build, trust and belief in the continuation of those efforts. And just ensuring that like, how are we capturing this? What is it part of our talk track? Do we have areas in the database to flag these things? Like just such a critical call out.
And it helps you start to, like, what's the best way to phrase this? So you may see like all of these leads coming in through this form or this inbound demo request, whatever. But as you start to ask those questions, they didn't find you from an ad, even though they may have clicked on an ad. They heard you from podcast. They heard you from that partner. They heard you from that co-marketing piece that you did. That's just not where they converted. And so like you can really get so much more of the picture if you just start to focus on that qualitative side and try and get some of that data, not just like trusting the tools and the platforms, but like truly just asking the friggin' question.
The U-shaped with the W-shaped attribution model.
the weighting of that, partner touch is just so much more valuable. That referral is going to drive so much, again, trust and just belief in, yeah, I should take a conversation with these folks than an ad ever will. And
Right.
yet, for the last decade and a half, we've seen such a weighting on these digital touch points that are easy to measure, but in actuality, don't bear the same amount of, relationship value as something that is more traditional does.
Yeah. Well, this has been great stuff, Marco. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the work you're doing at Loop and Loop itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So Loop is returns and reverse logistics operations platform for Shopify brands. So we serve about 4,000 of the biggest brands in the space. A lot of them you guys would recognize. So I just came in about 4 months ago or so, director of partnerships. We have a pretty good partner function here. It's about 12 people all in, whether they're like direct partner managers or some sort of related role, partner marketing, partner rev ops, things like that. And I was partnered with Loop at a previous organization, which is, one of the ways that sort of helped me find this great company and great group of people. And we, just like to tie everything together. More than half of all of our inbound, it has some sort of partner attach rate. Even though we may directly bring in through referrals and introductions, call it 30% of the pipe, we know that there's like almost double that just comes in indirectly, but it was because a partner told me or a partner sent me this information or came up in conversation and I, saw you at an event because I had a meeting with a partner there and yada, yada, yada. And so I'm very fortunate to be in like a very partner friendly organization with a founder who gets it and other leaders who definitely get it and are bought in, but still like always trying to find new ways to optimize, cross-functional alignment and just like better emotions to work together, to find more ways to go to market with partners and optimize that function, that channel. And yeah, that's just a little bit about me and Loop and what we're doing here.
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting call out just on like what I'm seeing in the partnerships partner ecosystem is, folks are finding, great companies and they're finding their next role based on the buy-in and the belief within partnerships. It's like a really interesting exhaust happening, not only like what is working from a tactics perspective or a strategy perspective, but like what organizations get it. And I think are going to be the ones that kind of emerge from this lull in SaaS that we're all coming off of. Because again, like they have that buy-in. They don't want to fight that battle and push a rock uphill every single day. And I think you're going to see that in the performance of those businesses, but also, the magnetism of folks that are good at these functions, which, have a tremendous amount of value to them. You're going to see them, gravitate towards those types of organizations. So that just an interesting call out that I never saw happen with marketing, as kind of digital marketing, rose and suddenly there was all this investment in all these groups and all this information sharing. That never really came about as a result of that wave, but I'm seeing that a lot with the kind of partnerships wave, which I think is really interesting and super valuable.
Yeah, and what's really awesome too is like a lot of the marketers that I continue to work with, and whether it's here at Loop or other organizations, like they're much more familiar with the partnerships motion today than years and years and years ago. I mean, it's pretty wild to see the just the rapid change and understanding of this motion. And I think a lot of it is because of the power of it. And again, just like the virality of it, because you can just get so many more eyeballs in such a short amount of time, going to market with other companies, that naturally just the impressions are going to grow with with the same amount of output essentially, right, or investment. So it's super, super efficient.
Yeah. Amen.
Awesome. And URL for Loop?
Loopreturns.com.
Loopreturns.com. All right. So check loopreturns.com out. That'd be great. And if people want to chat with you, is LinkedIn the best way to reach out?
Yeah. LinkedIn's always the best way. I'll be there anytime someone reaches out.
Marco DePaulis on LinkedIn, loopreturns.com. Those are the two places to go if you want to hear more from Marco and check out Loop. We'd appreciate that. If you are listening to the podcast for the first time or the 15th time, it'd be awesome if you could subscribe, like, and if you're feeling really feisty, maybe even write us a review. That would be awesome. Help amplify our message. Also, coming in January of 2025, we have the Go-to-Market Cheat Code book which
Mark
will be
your
hitting
calendar.
bookshelves. Yeah, mark your calendar. But you can also do us a solid if you would love to go to Amazon, search Go to Market Cheat Code. There is a pre-order page. Those pre-orders help us out, help us get distribution, help us get on the New York Times bestseller list, all those great types of things. If you really want to and prove it, you can send us a screenshot of your receipt. We'll ship you one of these badass in revenue hats, and that would be pretty awesome. So go to Amazon, search Go to Market Cheat Code, pre-order the book, send us their screenshot of the receipt. We'll send you a hat. Marco, thank you so much for joining the show. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much, man.
No, I really appreciate you. Thank you.